In the ultimate irony, just days before an upcoming joint press conference between Donald Trump and Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, two guys who tried to steal the last presidential election, CNN learned that the Republican National Committee, led by Trump's own daughter-in-law, was spamming robocalls to voters saying that it was Democrats who tried to steal elections. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. Again, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. It really is absurd, and the Republican Party merely traffics in only absurdity these days. It's all they know how to do. So just to remind you of what's going on Friday, tomorrow, the time of recording, Republican Speaker Mike Johnson, the most powerful elected Republican in the federal government, is going to Mar-a-Lago, Florida, and he is going to, kiss the ring and bend the knee to his cult leader, former President Donald Trump. And they're going to have a joint press conference about election integrity. And that's really all we know. But as Bob Geiger points out on Twitter, the fact that an election integrity event features two guys who tried to steal a legitimate 2020 national election is just absurd. And what makes it even more absurd is that CNN reported just yesterday that days before this, joint press conference about election integrity is supposed to take place, that the Republican National Committee, the body that's responsible for electing Republicans or getting Republicans reelected, which is now led by Trump's own daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, that they were spamming out robocalls to hundreds of thousands of voters with lies about the 2020 election and projections saying it's in fact Democrats who tried to steal elections. We're going to play some of these clips and unpack it together.
And as this press conference is coming up between Mike Johnson and Donald Trump on election integrity, we do have breaking news tonight on that topic, saying, quotes, massive fraud, because these are the words that actually went out in a robocall that was done on behalf of the Republican National Committee's new co-chair, Lara Trump. Lara is, of course, former President Trump's daughter-in-law, and the call was uncovered by our own K-File. Listen to what he found.
We all know the problems. No photo IDs, unsecure ballot drop boxes, mass mailing of ballots, and voter rolls chock full of deceased people and non-citizens are just a few examples of the massive fraud that took place. If Democrats have their way, your vote could be canceled out by someone who isn't even an American citizen. And I'm sure you agree with co-chair Trump that we cannot allow the chaos and questions of the 2020 election to ever happen again.
That's pretty despicable. I mean, for just a litany of reasons that the K-File author breaks down. We're going to listen to a clip by him, and then we're going to actually look at the article that he wrote, which digs deeper into the debunked claims that RNC robocall made.
So, Andrew, who exactly was the RNC targeting with this call, and how widespread was its receipt?
So this call went out to 145,000 different phones. And I think it's important to note that this is somebody, Lara Trump, who just 2 weeks ago was saying that vote by mail, Republicans should embrace vote by mail. They should embrace early voting. And now we see this call where they are essentially feeding people lies about the 2020 election, that dead people were voting, that undocumented immigrants were voting, that vote by mail is not safe. And Lara Trump, like her father-in-law, has a very, very long record of pushing these false election claims. We went through 4 years of her podcast and campaign show, and we found time and again that she pushed these claims. I'm going to walk people through a few of them. She said, quote, the Democrats cheated in the 2020 election. She urged Congress not to certify the January 6th, on January 6th, 2021. She said she did not, quote, believe Biden got 81 million votes. And then she made this rather odd claim in an episode where she said the odds of Biden winning in all of the swing states in 2020 as the votes were counted overnight was, quote, 1 in 1 quadrillion to the 4th power.
Right. Presumably that's hyperbole, but still ridiculous claims all the way around from Lara Trump. There's a written op-ed companion piece to this written by the guy we just saw on screen. He says it's the latest example of how the RNC under the former president's daughter-in-law is perpetuating lies about the 2020 election, even as prominent Republicans say the party needs to look forward to win in 2024. It goes to the quotes that we played from the robocall. The claim of massive fraud in the 2020 election marks a significant shift in messaging for the RNC because lies about the 2020 election had not been a consistent theme in its messaging since Donald Trump left office. But the call's message is largely consistent with the views publicly espoused by Lara Trump, as he points out. So, folks, here's the situation. All of the claims that Lara Trump and now her iteration of the RNC have made have been ruthlessly debunked, okay? As the CNN article points out, there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud in 2020, as even some state GOP election officials and former Trump Attorney General Bill Barr have acknowledged. The former president and his supporters filed more than 60 court cases in 6 key battleground states following the election and lost every one of them. And no, not merely on standing, even though that would be sufficient, given that you're supposed to have standing before you file suit. They lost time and again on the merits. They never won on the merits because the claims are bunk. And yet facts have never stood in the way of Republicans between themselves and a good fiction, if that's what it takes to sell to the American people to win elections. But the scary thing is, it's not just Lara Trump. It's not just Donald Trump. It's not just Mike Johnson. Again, Mike Johnson, who was a key figure in trying to resist the peaceful transfer of power from then President Donald Trump to President-elect Joe Biden. He was an avid supporter of Trump's vicious attempts to steal a free and fair election. You also have court officials. You have legal officials. You have Texas Supreme Court justices like John Devine here. This is what he had to say about so-called election integrity, and he cast aspersions on the 2020 election. And when you're listening to him, note, this is not a politician. This is a man who's supposed to be a judge, one of the highest judges in Texas, right? The Texas Supreme Court. This is what he has to say.
Every day there are abuses to First Amendment religious free speech issues and so forth. Election laws. Look at the election law abuse that happened. We're still fighting that. That's still out there. It's going to happen again. Do you really think the Democrats are going to roll over and let Trump be president again? Do you think they're just going to go away and all of a sudden find Jesus and be an honest election? I don't think so.
It's a cult. These losers have no evidence to support their claims. It just feels like a stolen election because they can't reconcile the fact that their loser cult leader is a loser cult leader who's never had a popular mandate. Even when Trump won in the 2016 election, that was solely by virtue of an antiquated electoral college, which, by the way, no other advanced democracy on earth has. Every other advanced democracy on earth, the vast majority of which have taken their cues from the United States, were inspired by the United States, improved on the U.S.'s system when they were like, hell no, this electoral college, this indirect election for the nation's highest office makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So we're going to have a popular vote to elect our leaders. We cling to the electoral college, and Republicans more so because they feel that that's the only way they can ever win the presidency. When Trump won in 2016, he didn't win the popular vote. People want to talk about how unpopular Hillary Clinton was, but she was still objectively more popular than Trump. And Trump didn't win in 2020. And even if he wins in 2024, it's likely not to be with a popular vote majority. Trump has never been a particularly popular person, but they can't reconcile that. They can't reconcile that. And so they have to create this almost like these religious falsehoods. And Lara Trump, by the way, was asked about this recently, about the 2020 election. I think it was by an NBC journalist, if I'm not mistaken. And he says, listen, are you planning on relitigating, as your father-in-law does, the 2020 election? She says, I think we've moved past that. It is what it is. We have to embrace, these new methods or these expanded methods of voting, absentee ballots, early voting, mail-in voting. She's publicly said these things. And yet, because she fervently believes without evidence that Donald Trump lost the election unfairly, she's trafficking in these lies. So it's absolutely absurd. And then to tack onto that again, the fact that this was found out mere days before Mike Johnson and Donald Trump are supposed to have a press conference about election integrity, it's super gross, super ironic, and just goes to show you how far the Republican Party, from Mike Johnson to Lara Trump to Donald Trump to Texas Supreme Court Justice John Devine and most elected Republicans in between, how much of a loser cult these people really have become. Let me know what you think in the comments.